Hello, so I'm Dennis Reidsma, and I'm also now here visiting with the Dutch delegation. We hear many wonderful stories. We're also kind of already coming here aware that we're going to this country where we have a somewhat problematic historical relationship with a somewhat problematic historical role. So earlier today, one person, she's not here now I think, asked, do we also have the habit of acknowledging the land on which we stand? No, we don't in the Netherlands, because in the Netherlands it makes no sense. It might make sense when we present in other places to briefly acknowledge our role in that other land. But yes, we are grateful to learn so many interesting stories from all these different perspectives, and also very much appreciated Laurindo's resilience perspective in this. But I'm going to talk about something entirely different, because what I do is make interactive systems. I'm originally a computer scientist. I drifted off towards more design work, and we make digital physical playgrounds. So there's some computer technology in there, cameras, sensors, projectors. Here there's like little pods that have some sensors in there and some sound and lights that enhance the playground. There you see something with cameras and a big projector on the floor where the children are playing. And we make these systems to get all kinds of effects in entertainment and engagement, or sport and movement learning. And in the purpose of this symposium, of course, we're going to look at how does the technology relate to promoting diversity or hindering diversity in playgrounds. And of course, both happen at the same time and through the same mechanisms. It's my name on top of there, but in my case, which button do I need? This one. There's so many other colleagues involved here that they really don't fit on a slide. There's 40, 50 names that should be here, whose work I am presenting. What we make is technology with sensors and output. It's always interactive, and it has a purpose. In this case, it's sport training. But it can also be children's play, for example. Different kind of technology, although again, there's some kind of sensors and some kind of projection on the floor. And the purpose in this case is engaging children's play. We have many different purposes for which we work, but it's always something related to embodied movement. So children's play, sport, it can be physiotherapy, it can be dance, it can be music, which is also very much an embodied activity. And we basically use any kind of technology. So here's just a small sample of stuff that colleagues in my lab make. Can be virtual reality, can be smart wearables. This is clothing that can change shape because there's like smart wires in there that pull the fabric and change its shape. It can be objects that include some sensors and other things to have interactive stations outside on a sport field where you don't have monitors and you don't have big screens available. Any technology, basically, and way more than just a few things that I show here. But what they all share is always there's interaction. And it's always through the same cycle of sensing something. This can be cameras, this can be microphones, but it can also be as simple as somebody pushing a button. Also that is sensing something. And we also always need to interpret what it means that we measure. Because whatever the system senses is about the users, about the people in the environment who are together there. And there may also be all kinds of things that we don't sense. So that's good in your system to be aware of that, that maybe we measure where the children are, but we don't measure everything about them. So when you, in the system, try to interpret what's going on, there's always a lot of guesswork involved. You kind of simplify the whole situation, measure some things, and then try to draw really big conclusions. And then there's some intelligence in the system. There's a goal in the activity, be it play or learning or anything else. So given what is sensed, the system needs to reason about or have certain simple rules. Again, it can be very complex with big intelligence in there, or it can be simple trigger rules. If this happens, just do that. And then the system needs to act. It needs to give some kind of feedback through all the modalities that we have available. And we're not very picky, again, so any technology that we find and that we think is fun can be used also for this feedback cycle. And of course, as a technologist, we like to think that we design the interaction of the system, but as you can see that the whole system of people acting in this environment, most of it happens outside of the system. So we design a little part of it, but what actually happens is the combination of what the technology does and how the people respond to that and interact with that, but also all the other things happening around it, between the people who are there and are interacting in more ways than just with and through the technology. So again, it's important to be aware that there's a lot going on that is not under your control and that you might not even know about it if you just look through the perspective of the system. These kind of interactive systems offer a rich task environment. Depending on what kind of rules you implement, you can make, for example, so these are all parts of a little project that a colleague of mine did with students, make existing playgrounds more interactive by adding a sensor here and a light there and some sound feedback. Some of them made a very much a fantasy storytelling environment. So roar like a dragon, or protect and cuddle the dragon egg, or so it's like a kind of a fantasy environment in a climbing structure. Very much storytelling, fantasy oriented, role play, pretend play. Other groups make something very much focused on vertigo, athletic movement, running around, jumping, running off a slide, getting dizzy. The interaction was made to stimulate that kind of behavior. Another group, again, made something that's very much focused on a rule-based game, like a game of tag or a game of hide and seek. We have specific rules, a specific goal to reach, and you play until somebody wins or loses, or you win together, I don't know, you achieve your goal, whatever that is. So you can make different rules and create, of course, different kinds of play here. But whatever you do, it's a rich task environment. So whether the goal is to engage in storytelling, or the goal is to do a game with specific rules, the way that the system operates, it stimulates these kind of rich behaviors. And by changing the rules in the design stage, so deciding what kind of rules you do, you make different kinds of play. But also, because it's an interactive system and half of it lives in the computer, you can change the rules on the fly. So as the game plays, you can manipulate how the system responds and influence the social and physical play as it unfolds. So for example, you can change the rules in a game of tag so it becomes easier to catch Jungting because she's very fast and light and she always escapes. So we make it a bit harder for her and a bit easier for me because I'm not so flexible and fast. So you can manipulate the physical things that happen, the physical capabilities in the game. And of course that immediately also changes the social structures. You can highlight one player more in whatever the game is, and that makes that player more central. You can imagine that these kind of changes have a real influence on the social structures of the play. You can imagine that you can use this for diversity, including people more or including people in a different way. At the same time, so talking about promoting and hindering diversity, if you don't pay attention to what you're doing and to all the different perspectives, it may be that all the rules that you make fit certain people, but not so much other people. So you need to understand that when you make certain rules, these rules don't have the same effect or the same meaning for everybody. So in the design stage already, when you prepare these kind of things, you need to be aware of everything that happens, which you can't, meaning that afterwards you need to get back and say, okay, what is now actually happening? And does it play out the same for everybody? And if it doesn't, well, then something went wrong and you need to get back to the drawing board and design different things. So it can help, it can hinder, and you need to get back again and again to the reality of what's really happening in the playful systems that we design. I just said that. So we can skip this slide. That's good because typically I have too many slides. So the second part is those systems have this intelligence, right? There are rules. We measure something and the system automatically adapts, changes the rules, responds to whatever is happening. And there's some kind of, you could say AI-like intelligence. Without going into too much details, can be many different kind of systems, system types. But we build systems. Maybe, so for example, this is the work that we're doing with Jungting and Caroline and also some of the other speakers later in this session. Put a smartwatch on people, measure how they behave, how they move in the group, maybe also ask some questions through the smartwatch, measure how close they are to each other. And then there's, these are some of those measurements, like you see people being close to each other or not. Again, that's close to what Jungting showed earlier. We analyze the patterns that happen there. Then we build our response patterns on whatever we have modeled. And being computer science, no, actually it's not just the computer scientists, it's also all the other people. People expect, no matter their background, that a system like that is fairly objective. And it works good or not so good, but typically it works not so good for everyone or it works well for everyone. But the reality is, of course, different. Partially that has to do with the fact that whatever comes into the computer is a limited view of the reality that we are responding to. So the computer does not see certain things. It misses certain patterns. And also when we develop our technology, we do the modeling and the machine learning. Again, we take certain directions, but we miss other directions. And this is the other source of how you can promote, but also very much hinder diversity in these kind of setups, these kind of playgrounds, when you are not aware of how the technology that you make is more fitting to some people than to other people. We can talk about all the details of why that is, the problems of AI explainability, AI bias, AI transparency. There's also a lot known about that. The interesting challenge is that when I talk about this with people who are not the computer scientists, but the people using the systems, it's of course hard to explain the underlying deep technological distinctions that really make the difference here, that cause the problems. But when I talk to the computer scientists, who I suppose should know about the technical details there, they find it hard to relate the technical details of their part of the system to how it will play out in reality. So both the computer scientists and the non-computer scientists find it hard to see the integrated picture where these two things come together. And it's only where the two come together where the problems arise. Not in the application itself. The application may be very good. The technology itself may be fairly neutral if you just look at it. But when it comes together is where the challenges, the problems arise. So what we are working on, and there I'm really not going into detail, but is making a conceptual model and framework and explanation. There's a lot of detail. I will not explain the model to you, but a model, a lens that helps us facilitate this communication between the computer scientists on the one hand, and talk them through this model of AI development through different stages, and show how decisions made here, maybe in the data collection or in the modeling step, may have unforeseen consequences here when you deploy it and it has an impact on society, but that the problem is not just here, but there's influences already starting here, and how to analyze the whole situation in those terms. And so this is part of my work now, is to take this model and bring it further to both the computer scientists and the non-computer scientists, to make sure that we do not only talk about the high-level problems. Oh, there's bias and discrimination in this kind of system. Yes, there is, but why is it there, and what can we actually do to make it different? And therefore we really need to dive into those details, and we hope to facilitate those conversations with these kind of models. Yeah, as I said, I'm not going to talk about all those details. That's too much. And as I said, it's not just AI developers, but everybody should learn this, so we can avoid the problems, but still deliver those advantages that these kind of interactive play systems also can bring, which are of course desirable. So that's it. Thank you.